All right, today's guest is someone who's lived multiple versions of the fitness life, from competitive bodybuilding to coaching everyday athletes. Austin Lapensohn has been both extremes of fitness and also practicing real life application of training. He's someone who doesn't just preach discipline, he's actually lived it, and now he helps others find that very version of themselves in fitness. We're pumped to have him on, talk shop, break down the fitness industry, and hear how his mindset has evolved along the way. Austin, welcome to the show, bud.
And I appreciate it. What a surprisingly fantastic intro. That's so fun. Nice work. You did a little bit of research, I can tell.
I worked on it. I worked on it.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me. This is actually my first podcast ever, so this is super exciting to kick it off with you.
Sweet. Awesome. Yeah,
Dude,
thanks
let's
for coming
go.
on, man.
Appreciate it.
Well, let's hop into it. Like, what first got you into fitness? Was there a moment or a person that kind of lit that fire under you?
100%. So my father was a competitive wrestler and boxer in college. So he went to University of Texas, and after like he retired from his boxing and wrestling career, he just kind of hopped into the gym space and he always gravitated towards strength training, weightlifting. Um, and I remember he would take me up to 24-hour fitness with him and he put me in the childcare center. And, I would do whatever they had to offer in the childcare center at a commercial gym like that. And then when I was 15, he started bringing me out onto the floor with him and, putting me through dumbbell bench press and chest flies and all the fun things that that you kind of get started into with weight training. And then from there, I just fell in love with it. My dad loved it. I loved it. It kind of was a good supplement to sports growing up. Was that strength training aspect? So I just kind of fell in love with the process ever since.
Very nice. Yeah. Was there any other sports involved in your life too around that space? I know you've talked about lacrosse as well, and
Definitely, yeah. Pretty competitive lacrosse player up until college, because by the time I had got to college, I was kind of burned out. So I played lacrosse all through high school, select travel teams. So always like a competitive athlete, always kind of wanted to push myself in that space. And then whenever I went off to college and sports ended, that's kind of when I really started gravitating towards the weights because the weights were a little bit safer in a sense that they weren't trying to cross check me and like knock me on my ass all day. So I started pushing dumbbells around because I could control those a little bit more than someone checking me with a stick. But that kind of filled that
Sure.
void that sports no longer filled. Yeah,
so when did you get introduced to kind of the taking it a little more seriously, other than just going to the gym during college?
definitely. So I've kind of always been around that fitness space, and once COVID hit, I was doing some film stuff out here in LA at the time, and then COVID hit. It kind of put a wrench in, the film career stuff, and I really decided heavily to jump in, just dive head on to like the fitness industry. I figured I had been training for so long, in college growing up, and I had acquired so much knowledge along the way that I really wanted to kind of pivot and jump into an industry where I could really help other people. So I decided, why not be a personal trainer? I'm spending all my time at the gym anyways. So I got my certifications, right? My NASM certification. And I got hired at Gold's Gym in Culver City, California, as my first personal training gig. And since then, I've switched a couple times, and I'm now an elite coach at Equinox, Marina Del Rey. But COVID, I guess, was kind of that 2020, 2020 was kind of that pivoting point.
So what's it like going through that process of getting like your certifications? So do you have to I feel like there's so many different certifications. Could you explain what you did and how you landed on on your path as a trainer?
Absolutely, yeah. There are so many different certifications, and some are held to a higher standard in the industry. I think one of the top is that NASM, that National Academy of Sports and Medicine. Um, so that looked like kind of it was an online curriculum, right? So you kind of go at your own pace online. So it could take 6 months, it could take years, I guess, if you want to take that long. But I finished the curriculum in about 6 months or so. They send you some textbooks, so there's like some practical application stuff. You have some physical knowledge that you can learn from, as well as the online part of it. Um, and then it was really just as simple as getting that certification, passing a pretty rigorous test that I was surprised at how difficult it was. Um, goes in depth in just so many different avenues, anatomy, physiology, working with clients, building relationships, rapport, everything from A to Z. But once you get that certification, I started applying for gyms in the area. Had a pretty great interview at Gold's Gym at the time, and they just threw me right into the mix. At the time, they actually didn't have a trainer at Gold's Gym, so they were looking pretty intently for one. And that kind of put me in a leveraged position of like, hey, they need help. I'm here. I'm ready to go. So I just jumped head on in and started taking clients from day one.
Which I'm sure is huge too, because then you get out of that phase of trying to like almost prove yourself. You're basically you're thrusted with some clients right away and can just get your client base going.
100%, 100%. It differs a little bit from Equinox in a sense that at Gold's there was almost like a queue of people that wanted to train. So like there were people that were ready to go and they hadn't had a trainer just because I think the trainers at the time had just up and left. So when I got hired and when I was brought on, they all just kind of like inundated me and I was like overwhelmed with all these people. So it was kind of a blessing and a curse at the same time. It was really great that I had people just ready to fill my books, but it was also an extreme challenge because I had never done that before. So I kind of had to learn along the way.
Yeah.
So with that introduction to golds, is that kind of clientele, right? I imagine you're getting like your everyday Joes, but obviously like my image of golds is maybe not Culver City, but the Mecca here in Venice. So I just think bodybuilders everywhere.
Definitely.
Is it kind of like a mix of clients? Like who are you kind of working with at that time?
Definitely. So the Gold's Gym in Culver City differs from that Mecca in Venice, right? The Gold's Gym in Venice is your very nitty gritty, like underground hardcore bodybuilding gym. The Gold's Gym in Culver was one of the franchise clubs that wasn't underneath that RSG umbrella that Gold's Gym Venice is. So with the franchise club, that was more along the lines of like your commercial 24-hour fitness, your LA fitness, right? You're getting everyone from I mean, I had clients that were like 14-year-olds that were literally training to get better so they could try out for varsity football in like high school, right? I had clients that were, 80-year-olds that their doctors had literally prescribed them like fitness as just something to do, like get up and get some movement in. So they'd wander into Gold's Culver. I had, people that just wanted to lose a couple pounds of weight, right? Feel a little more confident, feel a little happy, healthier. And then I had people that were like recovering alcoholics that would be prescribed like fitness as a way to kind of fill their time so they can
Mhm.
lessen their chances of gravitating towards the bad stuff, right? So at a commercial gym like that, you're getting just every type of client. And I loved working with every type of client.
Is there a common thread to any of those clients, kind of like that you've discovered throughout your entire time training, where an underlying maybe like root issue that's really trying to be solved or everyone's struggling
100%.
with?
100%. It's so easy. The common factor that every person who seeks out personal training, the one common factor is the fact that they do not realize how difficult it actually is. Right. I think a lot of people have this misconception or maybe just lack of understanding of how difficult like training is and kind of applying yourself in the gym, out of the gym, and finding that balance between the two. I know at least where I'm at now at Equinox in the Marina, I know a lot of people think that like, oh, I have a personal trainer, all of a sudden my problems are going to be solved. I'm going to get that six pack, right? My biceps are going to grow like overnight. And I think a lot of people don't realize that they really need to like kind of let themselves go and just trust the process and like the results aren't going to come overnight, right?
Sure. I know. Brandon, you had a question before that?
I was just gonna go. I was gonna ask you more about the when you're building out your workout plans for your clients, right? And understanding when you have that wide of a base of clients where they're coming from all different kinds of backgrounds, what are the kind of key things that you focus on in trying to build when you're working with these different types of people, and how do you go about that?
Definitely, for sure. So I think in a broad sense, a lot of people that seek out personal training, they're kind of doing it because they don't really know what to do, or they're in a place where they're so immobile or so stagnant in their life or their fitness journey that literally doing like anything will be an effective modality, right? The majority of people that train are looking for weight loss. It's kind of plain and simple, right? People want to hire a personal trainer because they don't know what to do to lose however much weight they want to or need to lose. So I think from that standpoint, doing burpees, doing the assault bike, doing the skier, like it doesn't matter what modality of cardio you do for the majority of these people, it's going to be effective. And that's really important because a lot of these people just need to move. So programming and structuring workouts for beginner beginner athletes or beginner clients is like the easiest thing in the world. And that's like the most fun part of the process. I think when it gets into the nitty gritty of like programming for specialized athletes, right? People that want to get better at football, people that want to get a faster 1 mile time or like produce more wattage in their output when they do the Peloton. Like those clients are the ones that need that heavily structured programming and attention to detail, which is also incredibly fun. But I'd say like the approach that I take is like the majority of people just need to move. So I get them in and I get them moving. And then we talk about dieting because that's incredibly important as well. Um, but when it comes along the lines of like structuring for those specific athletes, it's just so highly dependent on the athlete themselves. One of my clients, Noah, he's kind of like an elite marathon runner, and he's done, I think it's the Ironman that's like swimming, biking, and running as well, which is absolutely insane. But like when he sees me 2 times a week, all we do is legs, right? We do specific things that are going to help him with his rebound stroke, right? When he's running and producing power, when he's going into hip flexion and extension, right? So we do like tons of squats, tons of lunges, tons of hamstring curls, right? So I guess tangents aside, kind of to get back to that point, it's just so highly specific and dependent on the client's needs and what they do.
Yeah, which totally makes sense.
Yeah,
And I think the big thing you point out too is that just getting moving in the first place, right?
for sure.
For the majority of those clients, maybe at Golds, which was like that more like corporate gym, right? Where you have people of all different kinds of like walks of life. That's like where that's like makes sense where that would be. You guys have to work. That's what you have to work on them with. But
For sure, for sure. Yeah, I think like at a commercial gym, your Golds, your 24 hours, your LA Fitness, your Crunch Fitness, whatever. The type of demographic that's going to those gyms just needs to move to like feel good, to be happy, to lose that weight they need to lose, and which is like totally sufficient, which is perfect for like that type of person, right?
Let me ask you a question about that more granular program that you're doing for maybe someone that just comes in with a bit of experience, right? That intermediate, maybe more advanced athlete that's coming for training. Obviously, it's dependent on their goals and like what they're doing. But is there maybe some examples of like how nitty gritty you're getting? Is it come down to the sets and reps? Is it coming down to maybe like particular movements? What exactly is that more granular level of programming look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's kind of dependent on what that client is looking for, but you know, when people hit, so if we're talking about like an experienced client, right? I mean, I sometimes I even use myself as an example because when I did my show, I needed that extra push and I had to seek out help from a coach. And there's a little part of me in the back of my head when I was doing that that was like, I know everything. Why am I seeking out help from a coach? Right. And I think when it comes down to like bodybuilding or prepping for a show, you can only push as hard as you think you can push, right? But sometimes you'll get in front of somebody else, whether it be like me or when I was in front of my coach, and I'm going to be able to push you to that next level, right? If you are doing 225 for a set of 10 and you've done that before, you might not be thinking, I want to try and go for 15, right? Because you hit that threshold, 10 reps is feeling good. You may feel like if you're alone, you might struggle to hit 11 or 12. But like, I'm going to get behind that bar. I'm going to say, don't put that shit up until we hit 15, right? So we're going to push past failure. You're going to push past complete muscular exhaustion, right? And that's kind of what it takes to really, really get to that next level. And that's like the difference that a coach can make is just those last like couple of reps that you think in your head you might not have in the tank, but like you got them there. You got those reps, right? And if you really want to do as much damage to that muscle as possible and then promote the best recovery, sometimes it takes another person really pushing you to just take it to that next level.
Tyler gave me a quick intro to like what you do and who you are, but you do bodybuilding shows just for our listeners who haven't been introduced to that part yet.
Yeah, definitely. I've actually done only one at the moment. I probably will be prepping for a show maybe towards the end of the year. But I had a show 2 years ago, my first show ever. So it was actually my first introduction into that arena as well. I felt like, I had kind of reached a plateau in my training, in a sense that like I was looking for my reason. Why am I doing it? Why am I coming to the gym? Why am I pushing these weights around? Why am I curling these dumbbells? Like, what am I doing it for? And I felt like I really needed an additional reason to kind of take my training and physique to the next level. So I did decide to do a show. It was just classic physique was the division that, I competed in. Um, and from me, I had kind of just over the years built that base and that foundation. And it wasn't until I hired me a coach, I took my training from a 10 to a 20, right? As far as that intensity in the sessions, and then honing in on the diet as well, can just make all the difference in the world. And I think that was really where I was the most surprised was how much of a change you can see in your body and how much of a change you can make when you fix your dieting. Um, but needless to say, I did go through that entire process just to push myself to learn to try something different. And I stepped on stage and actually won my classic physique, my novice physique division that I competed in, which was just the best experience in the world. Um, I've taken a break for maybe 2 years or so, almost 2 years. But I'll be competing again here shortly. So you kind of get that itch. It's time to go again. Time to
Yeah.
step on stage again.
Okay, so that was only 2 years ago too. So that's okay. So you just recently started getting into this, like the actual show part.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I've
Okay.
been I've been really training, probably in intensely for maybe 10, 11 years or so, and then only got into that competitive and coaching space in the past like 2, 3 years.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Can you talk a little bit about that when you said, I thought that was interesting what you said right there is that you hit a plateau and then you were looking for something to do and to try and reach the next level and you wanted to compete in something. Can you talk about what that process was for you and how much that elevated you throughout like your training, throughout like your phase?
Definitely. I think what really pushed me to jump into that competitive space was the fact that like everyone I talked to, especially as I started coaching and just meeting, more bodybuilders, more fitness competitors, more athletes along the in my journey, my just along the way, they started asking like, "Hey man, do you compete? Are you ever going to step on stage? Have you ever thought about it?" And it wasn't until I just had so many people asking, and I was like, I actually never had thought about it. But now that everybody's asking, and I feel like other people can see my potential as well, I then felt like, well, hey, it's kind of like I'm doing a disservice to myself by just doing the same thing day in, day out, not changing any of these variables that I need to change to really elevate my, fitness game. And it wasn't until then that I was like, oh, shoot, I should like pick a show and I should, pick a date and give myself a time frame to do something. Because I've noticed if you don't have a time frame, it's so hard to stick to those macros, right? To show up, Monday through Sunday and grind every single day. So I picked a time frame and I was kind of like pressuring myself into being better. And that's really what it took for me to step on stage. So I literally like did research in the LA area and I found this NPC muscle contest, competition that they were hosting in Anaheim. And I was like, all right, that's it. I'm going to do it. So I literally signed up, I bought the tickets, the registration. And then I found a coach and we worked for probably 3 months or so. It's like a 3 month cut, to get show ready for that, that one Saturday.
It's badass, dude. That's in 3 months on a cut too. So you're consistently in a calorie deficit for 3 months.
Pretty much um, consistently in a calorie deficit. And I think it's also important. A lot of people kind of get that idea of like when they're in a calorie deficit that they're like in 1,000 calorie deficit, right? And that they're just like dying all the time. And it's not quite like that at the beginning. When you're 3 months out, especially for me, like I stay relatively lean, all year round. I'm kind of at that like 10 to 12%. So I didn't need to aggressively cut out 1,000 calories 3 months out, right? I just kind of progressively pushed that deficit a little bit more, started introducing a little bit more cardio, changing up the training style a little bit. Um, and I kept my calories about the same and just manipulated the macronutrients throughout that whole 3 month cut to get to where I needed to be. Yeah. But like, some of these elite dudes that are doing like, IFBB, like the Olympians, sometimes their cuts are like half a year, I mean, they're bulking for 6 months and then they're like immediately turning around from that bulk where they've got like excess amounts of body fat. And then they're taking 6 months to kind of gradually taper into a pretty aggressive cut to get to where they need to be.
Jeez. And so the idea with that is that you're essentially like, if you give yourself more time, is that you can just turn like that fat to muscle. I, I have a very like naive understanding of how the bodybuilding process works, other than just for me, just training as an athlete, which you feel like you never really go too far on a bulk because you have to kind of stay in like a certain like shape for sprinting or whatever it is, right? So, yeah. So is it like a 6 month like why? I guess why 6 months? Why is so long of a period to try and dial in like that your body?
Sure. So we'll just split the year in half for like simplistic sake. We'll just do 6 and 6, right? 6 month bulk, 6 month cut. You need to build muscle in order to, chip away at the fat and still have that muscle underneath remaining, to display on stage, right? So basically, if you're starting from zero and you need to put on muscle, you're gonna have to be in a caloric surplus, right? There's kind of no way around it. If you really want to put on a decent amount of muscle in like a short-ish amount of time, 6 months to a year, you're gonna have to be in a surplus. And being in that surplus, you're going to tack on a tiny bit of body fat, which is totally okay, right? Because if you're doing damage to your muscular tissues, you're doing damage to all that fascia and the fibers underneath your skin. In order for them to grow, in order to literally take the amino acids from proteins in food and repair themselves and get bigger, you're going to have to be in a caloric surplus because the demand for energy is going to be higher for your body. So along with that, along with muscle growth comes a little bit of fat retention as well, because your body is in an environment where it's getting more than what is required just to maintain itself, which is necessary because we want to get bigger.
Hmm.
So we put on some muscle, we put on some size, we put on some fat along with that. And then the idea with the cut, right? If we've done that for 6 months and we've put on 2 pounds of muscle or so, 3, 4, 5 pounds of muscle, then when we cut, we're going into a deficit that isn't too great because we don't want to start tapping into our muscle stores for energy, right? So that's where in that cut, it's really, really important to get your protein to hit those goals, right? And then you start manipulating the fat and the carbohydrate intake because that's what's going to give your body energy while you're losing fat, if that makes sense. So it's basically like a vicious cycle that forever repeats itself. If you're in that really heavily competitive space, you put on muscle, you gain fat, and then you lose the fat, but you try and retain the muscle. And
Yeah.
then you put on
Okay.
muscle, you gain fat, you lose the fat, try and retain the muscle.
Right. So in the process of losing the fat, you're trying to keep that muscle on as much of it as you can. You might lose a little bit from what it sounds like,
Yes,
but
yes.
okay. And then once whatever your date is for your show, then you're right there as like your peak shape.
Exactly. Then you get to display that muscle that was underneath all of that fat, all that water, all that, subdermal fluid retention, everything that you've kind of extinguished and gotten rid of. And then you just want to be like skin, bone, and muscle, essentially. And that's what you're showing off on stage.
Got it. Makes sense. Okay. And I'm sure that part's pretty rewarding once you go through a year long cycle to
Oh
go
man,
to
it was, yeah, it was. it's funny, I can't remember who I was telling, but I guess a couple people were asking me how it felt. And I think like when I stepped on stage and I did my routine and I did my poses, um, and then, like I ended up winning, and you hold that medal and that like trophy, and there's like all these people watching. That was such a fulfilling, gratifying moment. Like it was up there with like, graduating college, like walking across stage at college. It was like maybe even better. It's
Yeah,
such a
yeah.
fulfilling, fantastic
Yeah.
moment because, in your head, you had just put in months and months of that hard work and just the exhaustion and, sacrificing whatever you had to sacrifice, whether it be food, relationships, libido, I mean, just sleep, right? Like everything. And it's all in that moment that you get to display all that hard work. And that's just such a like a release of endorphins.
Yeah, and nobody gets to see that with you too. There's very few people, I would say, probably maybe like your significant others, family, or coaches
100%.
that really see the work that it goes on for that amount of time.
Nobody
Uh,
sees it. Nowadays, we follow all these guys on like social media and YouTube because we can record everything, right? We have our whole lives that we can just show because we've got phones. But still, I think even like the niche culture that, the bodybuilding and fitness world is, everybody else that sees these crazy ripped muscular people, like they don't understand. They have no idea kind of what it takes to get to that point. Um, and yeah, I mean, the only person that was like really there that could really see it, feel what I was feeling as much as she could was my girlfriend for sure. I mean, if you live with your partner and you're going through an experience like this, they're kind of going through it as well. It like kind of rubs off on them, which can sometimes affect that other person to some extent. But yeah, if you're the people that are like extremely close to you are going to see it and feel it. Um, and that can actually kind of help you develop an emotional connection like with that person as well, because then they start to realize why you're doing it or what it takes to really get to that point.
Absolutely.
Hmm. So for people that don't know much about like bodybuilding competitions in general, kind of like myself, how does it work, right? So you get on stage, you just went through this insane cut, you're at peak performance, and you're going up, you're hitting these poses. Like, are there judges? Like, how do you come out on top there and actually win the competition?
Definitely. Well, first off, I guess let's start like at the very beginning. So you kind of compete with people that are the same weight and the same height, right? Because it kind of levels the playing field, right? Bodybuilders are like on the shorter side. So like I'm 5'8". So I competed with other dudes who were like around the same height as me, because then it kind of makes it a level playing field as far as how much our body can put on size and hold size. So like we could take a dude like Chris Bumstead, right? An elite IFBB Olympian, like 5-time classic physique champion, right? He's like 6'2". So his weight class is significantly higher than what mine would be because I'm a shorter frame. So like I don't have the capacity to get to 250 pounds of stage ready, diced, solid muscle, right? as a smaller human, like I can't get to that point. I'm like stage ready at like 180. So it wouldn't make sense for a 250-pound person who's 6'2" to compete right next to a 5'8", 180-pound person. It would just proportionally blow people out of the water. It wouldn't be fair competition. So there's always like a division of a height class and a weight class. So once they group you together based on height and weight, then it's basically an experience game. So I had never competed before. So in my first show, I was able to compete in that novice division. People that have gone through a couple shows were not able to compete in that division because they may jump in and like blow me out of the water.
Mhm.
So what happened was I won that novice category. The, competing against, I think maybe it was like 4 or 5 other people who had also never competed. So I won that novice category, and that allowed me to go into the finals that Saturday night of the show and compete with the people who had competed before.
Mm.
So once I got to that point, then there was a little bit of a difference. Like, oh, okay, clearly, like some of these dudes that have competed before that might be taking a little Big Mac sauce, they're looking like a little different than, this junior guy who had just competed. right? So
Mhm.
then experience and muscle density and maturity and age kind of come into play with developing your physique over time. And Brandon, going through that process just over and over, right? Building muscle, then losing that fat, retaining the muscle, building muscle, losing the fat, retaining the muscle. Doing that over and over and over gives your body a different, harder, more dense muscular look than people who haven't done that many times. So then it's kind of like experience and kind of becoming a master at your craft, which really can separate yourself from some of the other competitors. So there's that, and then there's also, if you talk about like the specifics of what judges are looking for, conditioning is kind of like the immediate standout, right? So how well did your cut go? Did you retain too much water going into the show? Did you not cut your carbs? Are you looking bloated? Did you kind of spill over and you just aren't as shredded? Like, can you literally see a layer of fat underneath the skin on top of that muscle? Like they look for, vascularity and the separations between the fibers because looking at your average person, you would never notice it. But when you go to a show and you look at the competitors, you're like, holy shit, you can see like millimeters of depth, but between the striated shoulders and their deltoids, and you can see, if someone's flexing their quads, right? Between the femur and that lumborum, like you can see striations and the actual fibers of the muscle. And that's like what judges are looking for once you step on stage. That along with symmetry and how well can you hold your poses. Because if you're trying to hold a double bicep pose and you're just like shaking and trembling, you might be holding water, you might not be conditioned, you might be out of breath. So there's kind of a lot of things that go into it that the judges are looking for when they're scoring.
Got it.
Okay,
Got
and
it.
does scoring go across different competitions or different like could your score for like one weight class you're saying be compared to a score of another weight class, or does it not work like that?
That's a great question. So it actually can be compared, and bodybuilding is similar to, I guess, golf. You want a lower score. So
Mm.
if you're asymmetrical or like, you can't hold your front double bi or like your rear lat spread, um, you will gain points. They'll tack on points to your score relative to another competitor's score. And you want to have the lowest score at the end of the competition. And what they'll
Got it.
do is they call them call outs. So there's like, if the competition is big enough and there's enough people to line up on stage, they'll have, six competitors standing next to each other. They'll tell them all to hit the same pose and abdominals and thighs. So they'll flex their quads, they'll flex their core and their midsection. So everybody will be hitting the same pose. They'll kind of judge all those things that I had previously mentioned between each of the individual competitors. And then they'll set a bunch to the side and then bring up individuals so they can compare them side by side. And they'll kind of just go through that process, comparing one person to another, one to another. Um, and they do call outs. And that's basically like prejudging. And then there are finals typically in the evening. So usually there's two parts to a show, prejudging and then finals. And then
Gotcha.
once you get to that finals, they'll bring out basically the people who have only made the finals, right? So the competition starts to get a little bit tighter, and then you just want
Mhm.
to maintain as low of a score as possible.
Is there a way to tell, like in the competition itself, in that maybe the pre-judging, how well you're doing, right? Like if you're being called out kind of again and again, or maybe
Yes,
against some noticeably more jacked individuals, is there a way to like kind of feel where you're jockeying in the positioning?
100%. And it's literally just that word. It's like jockeying for position. So if there's
Hmm.
like four competitors, one, two, three, four, the people on the outside are typically not in a good position. So like
Hmm.
if I'm on the outside, they'll say like, competitor one and two switch. So then I'll move to the closer to the center. And then
Hmm.
maybe they want to compare me with the guy who's all the way outside this way. So they'll say two and three switch. So now they have one and three kind of jockeying for that first place in the center. And if they're, as you progress and as they compare more competitors together, if you're like consistently closer to the center and they're comparing you with everybody else, then you know you're probably in a pretty good position going into the finals because you might be like the standard that they're comparing and cycling through everybody else with.
Gotcha.
And they're call outs. So like if you make the first call out, that's typically a good sign. If you make like the fourth or fifth or sixth call out, if there are enough competitors, not really the best sign because they're like kind of saving you for last.
And comparing you at the very end, which you
The
want to
very end,
be.
yeah. So
Yeah.
like
Okay.
some of the elite guys that have won like multiple Olympias, they're like typically pretty fine. They'll go up, the judges will look at them like really quickly and they're like, okay, great. Like these guys have been the standard for so many years based on the aesthetics, the symmetry, the conditioning, the definition, the size. And they'll like call those guys up. They'll be like, all right, great. We'll see you guys tonight. And they'll push them aside. And then they'll like compare the other competitors to see who's going to go on to compete against the standard, right?
Hmm. Hmm. That makes sense. You brought this up kind of very briefly, but I've always been curious. So you brought up the Big Mac sauce, right? Little extra juice.
Sure.
Is that considered like cheating in that industry? Is it like considered a standard, like in baseball, for instance, right? Like you talk about Barry Bonds, all these guys who are just jacking up home runs, but then there's always an asterisk next to them. Is that kind of the same thing for bodybuilding?
So it's 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 so funny, right? It's the subject. It's the subject that like everyone talks about. It can be taboo, it can be out in the open. At like so when I competed, I'm lifetime natural, right? I've never touched
Mm,
this stuff. I struggle with it every single day. Like, should I take 200 milligrams to test? I'd be an absolute unit. I would be a monster. But I'm like, you know what? I'm only 30. I'll give myself a couple years. Like, I don't need to touch that
sure.
stuff now. I think I'm still kind of bordering like what my natural potential would be. So the competition that I did, um, they didn't test. It was just a competition where they said like we're not going to test. You can be natural. You can take supplements. You can be an enhanced athlete, I guess, right? So
Hmm.
I went up, and it's so funny. I don't know if y'all will be able to like pull up pictures or anything. It'd be great if you could. I can give you some stuff. But you can see like when I was standing up when I went into that open class with the people that had competed before, you could see like the legs, like the definition and the size and the musculature in the legs. You're like, okay, this person clearly is like not as enhanced, if at all. And this person's like in a different category. So like when you get to, the Olympia, right? These hyper elite, extremely competitive competitors that are like doing this for their livelihoods and making hundreds of thousands, if not like millions of dollars from living this lifestyle. Um, they're all enhanced, but the playing field is so level, right? So if you're
Hmm.
competing against another athlete who has the same knowledge, the same education, the same doctors, the same information on all of those supplements, all those anabolics, whatever you want to call them, it kind of levels the playing field. And usually I go by like, if you have to ask, they're most likely taking something,
Okay.
right? And that kind of goes without saying for like anybody in the industry. Like if you see someone in person and you're like, what the heck? They're so vascular. Like their skin looks so thin. They're so grainy and you can like see so much definition. And then you see them like again in like 6 months and they look exactly the same because they weren't prepping for a competition. That's just how they live their life. You're like, all right, you're probably having some help from somewhere because
Hmm.
it's not
Hmm.
sustainable, right? But if you have help, it can be potentially more sustainable. Um, I always like to throw in like I mean, baseball is great. Like Jose Canseco, Barry Bonds, like all these dudes that supposedly were taking stuff.
Hmm.
Sure, they were taking stuff. They have asterisks by their names, but they were also hitting 400 feet bombs off of
Yeah.
pitchers who were also taking things, throwing 99-mile-an-hour
Yeah.
fastballs straight down the middle. So it's
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
was the playing field even? Maybe. I think so. Right? Lance Armstrong, right? He got busted for doping, right? Was everyone else that he was competing against, during those Tour de France's also getting a little bit of help, maybe? Yes, probably so. So
Hmm.
it's like, the playing field is kind of level in like the elite bodybuilding industry. So they're most likely all taking something. But there is a clear differentiation between like those dudes who take things and people who don't, because our bodies can only produce so many hormones, so much testosterone, so many androgens before we literally hit a genetic potential. And then if we want to bust through that potential, then maybe we get some help.
Hmm. Have you seen the documentary out there, Icarus? I think it's on Netflix.
I don't know.
Um,
Maybe someone was just telling, I think maybe it was you that was telling me about that, but I haven't seen it yet. I can't
it's pretty
remember. I
good.
haven't listened to it.
It's about the Russian Olympic team. So they were
Mm,
banned from the Olympics. I don't know. I guess maybe the last two Olympics. I'm not too sure. But they when they hosted in, I don't know, Moscow a couple years back or a couple Olympics back, they were able to get around the entire testing
mm,
infrastructure within the Olympics by just the timing of their doses. And the
sure.
whole the whole documentary is actually with the head doctor who led the program for them, and he talks about it all of like, I can, and he brings on the guy leading the documentary, actually does a cycle with him, and he's doing some bicycling or a
Sure.
cycling
Sure.
competition. And yeah, it's totally just like when you take it, how you can get off of it where you're not testing. It's an interesting documentary around that stuff and how it's kind of, made its way into sports, and just
No,
how
that's
it's definitely still going on. It's, you can, get around it if you know the science.
100%. That's actually a fantastic point, right? All drugs, medicines, whatever you ingest has a half-life, right? If
Hmm.
I'm applying for a job in a month, right? And that job I know is going to test me for marijuana, right? And I go smoke marijuana today, knowing that in 30 days you're not going to be able to detect it in my system, and I'm going to pass that test. Does that mean I've never smoked marijuana? Maybe, I don't know, because if you can't prove
Yeah,
it,
sure.
right? You know, but it's the same
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
with doping, right? If they know the Olympics are coming up and they're taking androgen X, right? And they know that androgen X is going to give them that elite edge as far as training and recovery and rest and, muscle protein synthesis and sleep and whatever. But in 30 days, compound X is going to be erased and untraceable from your system when you have to do the test. Does that give the competitor an edge? I would say so, if they've trained right and in their programming they were taking something. Um, but then they found a way to eliminate that from the testing or have it be untraceable or keep the levels so low that whatever test they're using, right, is not even going to detect it. That's definitely a way to get an edge that to gain an edge that I think a lot of athletes do, whether it be bodybuilding, cycling, baseball, NFL, basketball. Who cares what the sport is, right? I think to some extent, if you're smart enough and have the right people on your side, you can probably get away with most things.
If you're not cheating, you're not trying.
You're not
You
cheating,
gotta,
you're
you
not
gotta,
trying.
you gotta try every edge, especially if you're a high level competitor like that. I imagine it happens all the time in the NFL. You see guys getting popped for low levels of stuff, but
Of
yeah,
course. I
it's
mean,
yeah.
people get
I was
off for stuff, like that all the time. And that's, because they're being goofy or they're taking other things. So what can happen also is like, um, certain compounds that you take can have elevated numbers from other things that you're also taking as well, right? So, just throwing
yeah.
an example out there. But if an NFL player is like flying under the radar taking something, which is giving them an edge, and then all of a sudden they go out and they party and they take like some sort of party drug, right? That could
Hmm.
potentially elevate the levels of whatever performance enhancement they were taking. So then when they jump into that test next, then all of a sudden those levels shoot up and there's a big old red flag and they weren't expecting it and then they get in trouble.
Interesting.
Interesting. I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, other drugs can absolutely like affect and spike levels, elevate levels of the effects of other drugs as well. And it's like if you haven't done your research and you're also doing things that might not be too healthy for you, that can spike levels and you get crazy readings and then all of a sudden you're getting in trouble.
Yeah. Let me bring it back to the bodybuilding here. I just have a question around kind of like the day to day, right? Um, but more so up until the show. So like you're getting that peak cut. What is like your pre-show prep? Is there anything in particular that you're doing that's out of the ordinary up until that day?
Definitely. So 3 months out, life was pretty normal. Um, 2 months out, I was starting to get a little hungry and a little tired and a little irritable just because my carbohydrates were dropping. So I was still maintaining, I remember the numbers. I was eating 2,250 calories for basically the whole 3 months. The only thing that would change was where I was getting those calories from, and that was mainly carbohydrates. So, like 2 months out, my coach would look at me and he would say, like, all right, abs are looking good. We still got a little bit of lower back fat. Like, let's drop your carbs for the next week to 60 and see how we feel. And in my head, I'm like, oh shit, 60 carbs, like that's gonna be a nightmare because I have 10 clients today and I also want to train. And
Yeah.
your energy starts
How
getting a little low.
how much did you
So
weigh at that point, really fast?
yeah, so when I started the cut, I was 180, 185. When I finished the cut, I stepped on stage at 169. So it was a deceptive 169. I looked a little bigger than what 169 sounds like. But I had not lost. I remember doing my in-body like biometric scanner and the DEXA scans and stuff. I had not lost like any muscle. So I think from that one, when I weighed 185, I had 95 pounds of muscle on my frame. And then when I weighed 169, had about 95 pounds of muscle on my frame. So literally all of that weight, all those 16 pounds were just from fat and water, which is like perfect. Like that's what we wanted to do.
Mhm.
Um, So like, 2 months out, coach started throwing in cardio because I didn't really do a lot of cardio. You can manipulate your body a lot through dieting without having to do cardio. Um, just consuming less than what your body requires to maintain itself at its current weight, you'll start losing body
Mhm.
fat. But it was like really time to kind of like lock in. And I started doing cardio. So what I did was I actually bought a stationary bike, like a bicycle I got on OfferUp, and I put it so close to my bed that I would get up in the morning. I would not even touch the floor. Would literally get up out of bed and I would roll onto the bike. And then I would flip on YouTube and I would just cycle for like an hour. It wasn't crazy intense, but I was moving, right? I was getting a nice little sweat on. Um, so like when it came down to it and we really had to start dropping some water and some fat, I would cycle for an hour in the morning. I would go to Gold's Gym in Venice and train because that's where my coach was at the time. I would train for like an hour, and he would put me through whatever he needed to put me through, whatever weak areas I had to build up. Lots
Mhm.
of chest flies for like upper pecs, lots of reverse flies for delts, um, lots of shoulders, like my weak points that we kind of just had to keep strong and kind of hammer in. So when I was losing weight, those places weren't really affected or affected the least.
Mhm.
So I would train for an hour, then we would go upstairs, and this was in June and July. So it was, freaking hot in LA, upstairs in Gold's Gym in the posing room with no air conditioning. And basically, I would pose for 30 minutes. My coach would call out certain poses. And that point, you're kind of being wrung out like a sponge or like a towel, right? You're just like squeezing and holding and literally just dripping sweat, which is a good thing. Energy's
Mhm.
getting pretty low at that point. And I remember after I would train and then after we would pose, he would be like, all right, I know you don't want to hear it. We got to do it. Go do 45 minutes on the Stairmaster. And I'd be like, oh my God. So I would go do another 45 on the Stairmaster. And that again was like low intensity. I wasn't like killing myself with the cardio. It was just a little bit to burn those additional calories and try and tackle into those fat stores. So, I mean, I was doing 2 hours of cardio, 2 months out before the show. I was doing 2 hours of cardio and then about an hour or so of training. So like 3 hours a day. We're kind of being dedicated to, just training for the show.
Mhm.
On 60 carbs. That's
On
that's
60
tough.
carbs. And 60 was
That's
high too.
tough.
I remember like a couple times he's like, all right, he's like, let's try 30. So I'm like, all right, I don't, you have like two French fries
Brutal.
and you're at 30 carbs. So like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Drink a lot of water, put a lot of artificial sweeteners in water. So it's like tricking my brain that I'm like getting sugar. And then
Uh,
a lot of cauliflower rice, a lot of vegetables, lots of
so yeah,
fibrous things.
so that's what I was gonna ask. So you're at 2,200 calories
Yeah.
with only 30 grams of carbs. Like, where is the majority of that calorie count coming from?
Yep. I was going to Smart and Final and I was buying uh those 2 pound tubes of 96.4 ground beef. So like the leanest ground beef I could find, tons of chicken, tons of ground turkey. Um, I was eating maybe 2 to 3 pounds of meat a day. Um, but this was only right when those carbs started really, really dropping to really push the
Hmm.
protein count. So, I was getting, it's funny, every now and then I'll literally go back through like MyFitnessPal and like check to see what the numbers were, just because like I don't believe it sometimes. I was at like 350 grams of protein, you know,
Oh.
30 to 60 carbs ish. And then the fats, I was only getting the fats from the meats that I was eating. So I didn't even really pay attention to that. It was usually like
Hmm.
60 ish. But just like tons of meat, tons of chicken. I was spending so much time trying to figure out how to get creative with what I was eating so I wouldn't get bored eating like, just a tub of like cauliflower rice and ground beef. So I
Hmm.
would take my chicken and I would like grind it up and then I would like press it out into a pizza crust. And then I would like make a pizza on top of the chicken crust and bake that. And then I'd have like chicken pizza.
There you go.
So I was getting I would take like liquid egg. I was doing a lot of liquid egg whites too. I would take liquid egg
Hmm.
whites, put them in the little like waffle press, like the little mini circular waffle press to make
Hmm.
hamburger buns out of egg whites. And then I would eat a
Gosh.
burger and the bun would be the egg whites. So I was just like
That's
kind of
crazy.
losing it, just doing crazy stuff like that. But it was like fun and it was exciting and I would
Yeah.
spend a lot of my time doing that.
Yeah. Well, short
Oh my
season, right?
gosh.
That delayed gratification for what ended up being you getting that fulfillment while actually on stage.
A hundred
Um,
percent. And I look back on those times when I was like really deep into prep so fondly because I think it really kind of like hardens your character and it gives you such a different view and experience of just training and like this lifestyle in general that most people don't do. So it's kind of fun to go through something so unique and challenging and different.
mhm. Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, the stories that you've told me too of those cuts are just so gnarly. The fact that you're getting out of bed onto a bike first thing in the morning,
Yeah,
not even throwing clothes on, that's
I know.
hilarious.
Yeah. Just some crazy stuff. I mean, when you really get down to it, like it's kind of what has to be done. There's really like no half-assing prep because you literally have yourself to show for it at the end of the prep, right? When you step on stage and like people are looking at you and all eyes are on you and you're, paying for this registration and you're paying for the show and you're paying for the hotel and you're paying for like that video and photo package at the end, right? It's like you don't want that to all be for nothing. So when you're going through it and you're, struggling and you're hungry and you're up at night and you are mentally exhausted and physically exhausted, it's like you just have to remember like everything you're doing it for. And I think for me, that really helped me because there are times when like, man, you want to break down and cry. You want to eat the whole bag of hot Cheetos and like you really got to like take a step back, realize what you're doing it for, how amazing it's going to feel at the end. And that's kind of like what was my motivating factor and reason as to why I was doing it was just to get to that end goal, to get to that Saturday where all that hard work pays off.
So that,
Too for
yeah.
literally anything else in life that you have to dedicate that time and honestly make a lot of sacrifices for.
100%. 100%. I mean, I think it like, competitive bodybuilders, like you can give them something to do and like they're going to do it because whatever you give them to do is not going to be as hard as cutting for a show.
Yeah.
So like, if you want people in your corner and on your team, it's like find people that have competed before because they're the ones who know how to stick to a plan, how to get it done, and they're going to make it happen kind of regardless of what it takes.
And it's like it's one of and what it sounds like too, it's one of those sports where you literally cannot cheat any part of it. You cheat any part of it and it shows,
It's
right? I
going to
think,
show.
right? Because if you think of like think about any like ball sport, right? Basketball, football, baseball, there is like a level of like God given ability sometimes that can overcome a like bad discipline or a lack of discipline, right? And so what it sounds like is that and it makes total sense. If you don't like, you can't have that kind of you can't do those things in bodybuilding. Otherwise, you're just not going to have the results that you need to compete and potentially win these events.
You're 100% right. You'll the work that you put in is going to show at the end, right? If you're, not sticking to your stuff and your coach is telling you to do cardio and you're not doing it and you're sneaking, Twinkies behind his back, right? When he's not watching you, it's like you get up on stage come show day, you're going to see it, you know? I mean,
Hmm.
especially if that it has been like a consistent thing through prep and you're just falling short on what specifically you're supposed to be doing, right? What the objective is. You get up and your work's going to show for it, you know?
Totally. How do you think that's affected you just in like outside of prep, outside of the sport, really, just in your life, like going through those kind of things? Has it carried over to just your day to day?
I think for me as a coach and like the career that I've chosen, having gone through that process helps me so much because I mean, I've done it. So like I totally get where anybody's coming from when they talk about how difficult it is. And then also, I think it's helped just with kind of coaching and prepping my clients for like the nutrition changes and the dieting changes that it really takes to kind of make a difference in their journey and to see progress. It helps me. Um, it helps me in just my methodology of like communicating with that person and having like sympathy and being able to empathize with how difficult it is because I've been through that myself. So I think it actually helps and strengthens my relationships that I have with my clients like at work.
You can relate to them, and so it's relatable, and you know you've been
Absolutely.
there,
Super, super relatable.
and then they know you've been there too. So then there's a level of trust that comes from that too.
Absolutely. Yeah, another level of trust is established. And then I think another almost like another level of professionalism on my end as well, because they trust that like you said, like they trust me, they know that I've been through that. So why would they not take my advice, right? Because I've got literally the photos to show for it, right? I can say I've done this. I know how difficult it is. We want to get you maybe not necessarily to a point where we're stepping on stage, right? But if we want to even start tapping into fat loss or losing weight, listen to me, trust me, I know what I'm talking about.
Mhm. You have the proof. It's
Right.
there. Hmm.
Right, absolutely.
Absolutely.
When it comes to keeping your clients accountable, right, and out because there's obviously in the gym pushing them to the failure, pushing them to their sets. You can kind of make sure they're hitting their workout, but when it comes to that nutritional aspect and that dieting for a lot of your clients, like how do you manage keeping them disciplined and holding them accountable?
Yeah, that's definitely the most difficult thing. Because, I tell all my clients, like, I can be that consistency. I can be that motivator when you're here in front of me at the club, right? Because I'm going to push you and like, you're going to do what I say here, which is fantastic. But then when you go home, right? What are you eating when you get home? What are the decisions that you're making? And the way that I typically go about it is I try to help them understand and remind them what specifically their reason is, right? Why do they want to get stronger? Why specifically do you want to lose these 10 pounds? And I kind of hone in on that why, that X factor. Because if we can
Hmm.
attach kind of like an emotional, if there's an emotional attachment as to why you're doing what you're doing, you're going to be significantly more likely to try and get to that goal or to continue doing it. Um, whether that be like more confidence with women if a guy's trying to get a six pack, or even vice versa, right? If a girl's trying to grow a booty and have like nice quads because she wants attention from dudes, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to continually remind you of that throughout this progress. And that should be enough of a motivating factor to continue on this path. And also, I've had this conversation a lot with a lot of clients. They're spending a lot of time and a lot of money, right, to train with me here at Equinox. So it's
Hmm.
like if you're paying me for my time and my experience and my knowledge, why on earth would you throw this money at me, throw this time at me, come up here and put in like the blood, sweat, and tears, and then go home and negate all of this hard work that you're putting up by, choosing cheeseburgers multiple days in a row or doing whatever they're doing that's going to kind of limit or inhibit their progress. It would be like shameful and almost like you're doing yourself a disservice, right? So reminding people of that simply sometimes is a big motivating factor.
Hmm. Yeah, uh, that's one thing that I've come to know or come to appreciate too is like to hold yourself accountable, you have to put your own skin in the game, and that buy-in of just paying for personal training, not including the time that you have to put in for it as
Mhm.
well. But it just there, just the initial upfront cost is kind of the perfect like anchor tether to that commitment that you kind of have to maintain for it.
Right. Absolutely. And it's definitely a mental game as much as physical, right? Like it's freaking hard to take an hour out of your day to train. And then it's also freaking hard to go home and know what specifically to put back into your body so you're not
Yeah.
throwing away all of your progress. Like it's extremely difficult. So I think education for a lot of people is like really important as well. And also trial and error too. Give this a shot, see if this works for you. If it doesn't, no problem. Let's figure out another way that we can get you to your goals. Because I'm the coach. When you come to me, and you're looking for a trainer, it becomes your goals become my goals. So like if I'm not helping you get to your goals, then I'm also feeling like a failure as well. And I
Yeah.
think the way that I kind of relate to my clients and get them to do what I want them to do is the fact that they feel like if they don't do it, they've let me down. And they don't want to
Mm,
let me down, right? They want to see me happy and excited and, congratulatory. And like we all want to get to our goals together. And, like, if my clients
Yeah.
don't do that, then nobody's having a good time, and they don't want that. I don't want that.
Yeah.
it's so weird that people are like that too, because you said, there's the accountability of someone else, but it's so funny that like no one else holds themselves accountable either, because you don't want to let yourself down. But they've had this goal for, I'm sure a lot of clients come to you and they're like, I've been wanting to lose weight for the last, year to couple months, and but their own accountability to themselves is not high enough motivating factor to actually get things done. It's very interesting psychologically how people need someone else, whether it be a gym partner, a trainer, maybe even a significant other, to hold them accountable to actually getting a catalyst, um, some type of like pain point to actually make them go and take action.
Definitely, and it's all about, like, finding that person's pain point, right? Like, if a client comes in and they want stronger shoulders, like, we always use this example because it was a legitimate example that actually our manager had, and it's an easy one to kind of allude back to. This, older gentleman, he was probably, like, 70, and he came in and he's like, "I want stronger shoulders." And my manager was like, "Well, why do you want stronger shoulders?" And he's like, "Well, my daughter is about to have a baby, and like when my daughter has that baby, I want to be able to hold that baby up." And it's like,
Mm,
all right, great. Like that's the best X factor. That's the best pain point anyone can
Yeah.
ever give you. Because throughout that person's training, it's like you can continually remind that person, right? Of that reason. Your daughter's about to have a baby. And when that baby's born, you're getting a little old. We want to make sure you have strength in your shoulders so you can hold that baby up. That's going to be the most rewarding, incredible experience ever when you get to that point. So let's stay focused on the journey so we can get you to that point.
And it's also too, I think it's having, so you know that I think all of us can relate to this whenever we're training for something, whenever we're doing something, that you have your why that you might that it's there. But then when you're by yourself and you're alone through that process, that's when it can be the hardest. And so having a group or just a trainer or somebody around to give you those reminders can instantly ground you back into what the purpose is and why you're doing it. And
100%.
so it's like, and that's the benefit of having like close friends that or are on similar goals, having a trainer or whatever it is to be able to do that. And it's like doing it together makes it so much easier. I think like Ty, we were talking about it before, like just even running. You mentioned a run club, how much having a run club can help you like run more and be more motivated in it, right? It's just having like a group and a community that's pursuing a similar thing, or just somebody that's simple as just to remind you. I think, yeah, it's really valuable.
Definitely. I think when we work in a community that is all kind of working towards the same goal, more or less, whether it be like running, Venice Run Club, or, going up to Equinox and training. It's like if you're surrounding yourself by people who are also striving towards something better and working on themselves for any particular reason, it's going to be so much easier for you as the individual to also hit that goal.
You're the sum of the five people you spend the most time with. But yeah, a question for you here, because you talked about education, right? And a lot of people just need to be more educated about a lot of these topics. Uh, Kind of what's your opinion now with, how much social media and just like online fitness has come about, from workouts to just advice of online coaching businesses. How do you sift through all that knowledge to see what's actually useful and what's kind of just noise and fads?
Yeah, that's really interesting because the whole social media boom of like, fitness being on all these platforms and all this accessibility with like TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, um, it's kind of a beautiful thing, but it's also kind of like a horrendous and terrible thing at the same time, just because I mean, everybody knows like you can go onto Instagram and you can see someone doing like the goofiest shit that is probably going to get you hurt and that may not be backed by any science or evidence or whatever. And then you can scroll down one reel and you're watching like, you know, all of these certified, amazing, incredible coaches who have so much knowledge and have seen success from so many other clients teaching you one thing. And then you scroll down again, right? And then someone's like, oh, disregard everything that last person said. So there's so much information out there. And I think kind of goes back to what I was saying about like beginners, right? If beginners do anything, they are most likely going to see some progress quickly, whether that be if they're trying to lose weight or if someone who's never touched a dumbbell before, some kid wants bigger biceps and they're getting underneath a bench press, they're probably going to build a little bit in their chest and shoulders, right? So if it's a beginner and they're using something they've seen online just as that catalyst or that as that motivator to get out and do something and like get themselves into a gym, fantastic. I love that. That's incredible.
Hmm.
I love that there's information that people can just see super fast and like take that and use it. I think, it gets a little dicey when people start like searching for things with a bias and with like the intention of trying to find things wrong with particular exercises or wrong with particular supplements or wrong with particular people. Um, and we're just so inundated with so much information that it can kind of be hard to focus on what specifically you're looking to get out of the information. Um, I think more or less it's a good thing that there's so much out there, but also like, you see some people doing some goofy stuff in the gym that could potentially get themselves hurt or doing something with just terrible form or lifting too much weight over their head or doing something incorrectly. And it's like, from my perspective as a coach, at the end of the day, I may say something to that person to try and help them, or I may just let it go because like they're up here, they're exercising, they're thinking that they're going to
Hmm.
get better. By all means, if they're thinking that and they do, more power to them. I think where it starts getting a little dicey is like when people just start attacking other people for kind of putting information out there, whether it be for a good reason or a bad reason. I think it's just kind of dangerous. Like social media, people are using it as like these platforms to kind of cut other people down sometimes, which is
Hmm.
not the best thing. Especially like in an industry where we're all just trying to get better, be more
Yeah.
healthy, be stronger, be happier people. Um, but overall, I think tangents aside, I think it's fine that there's just so much out there.
Are there any fads or health trends that you really like get behind that you really like?
Ooh, that I really like. Um, yeah, let me think. Fads or health trends. I don't know. I'm drawing a blank coming up with anything off the top of my
Like, I
head.
don't know, this something that I think is like a health trend, or even and maybe it's not even like it's not really gym related, but have you guys ever tried like mouth tape or anything like that?
Oh,
Like those kind of things, like that
I
kind of
have
stuff
done
where
the
I'm
mouth
like,
tape.
right,
okay. So
right,
great.
where it's
So,
like
so Tyler, like your experience with the mouth tape, like why did you do that? Or why do
So
you do
my
that?
Yeah, so mine was for better recovery, right? So got the Oura ring, started tracking my sleep more. I'd have a lot of um wakes throughout the night. And so why I tried it out as I was looking into it, and a lot of it just had to do with oxidation of your muscles while you're sleeping. So I did the nose strips to try to help with intake of air. That one really helped. I have like a bad snowing problem as well, so that like that one I still do. I did the mouth tape. Unfortunately, I have a pretty killer mustache that really affects how the mouth tape goes over.
Right?
But anyways, I did that and it actually made it worse. I stopped doing the mouth tape because I would wake in the middle of the night either from like if I was coughing, all of a sudden I'm wide awake, or there'd be times where like it would fall off and it was just annoying. So yeah, the idea of why I tried it was for better recovery during my sleep. Ended up, mouth tape didn't work, no strips, still a big fan of.
The nose strips. Okay, great. So something like that where, you're seeing like a trend or a fad or a niche product or something that just blows up from social media. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I want to try that because it's working for other people. And then it works for you. Like that's fantastic. I think, it's like for me, I don't necessarily have that problem of like not getting as much airflow and oxygen when I sleep. So like something like that wouldn't necessarily work for me. But I think if people are seeing these products or these fads and trends and they're trying them and they're working for you, Tyler, it's like, dude, more power to you. Like that's fantastic. I think are you going to do it forever? Maybe not. Are the, is the recovery that you're getting from it measurable, marginal? I don't know, maybe, right? But at some point in your life, are you going to be like, you know what? I'm like over this. I bought into it. It was hype. It was cool. It did help. I felt better. Did you feel better because it was a placebo and like the fact that you were trying something was actually making you sleep better through the night, or at least think you did? Maybe. I don't know. But, if
Mhm.
people try these things and it works for them, or they think it works for them, and that in turn is like helping them reach their goals or progress on their journey, great. I'm all for that.
I think that's one thing of social media, and especially in fitness, right? Is you have all these different fads that come up. I think you could probably even say like cold plunge, but I think cold plunge has enough data behind it now that has like it's effective for depending on what you're trying to do with it. But
Yeah.
um
Well, that's
those
that's another one too. Like, there's two afflicting or conflicting opinions about it because there's multiple studies that will show it's good for recovery. Then there's other studies that show like it reduces muscle atrophy by like 66%. But again, like comes down to like when are you doing it and stuff. It's
Definitely.
yeah, it's hmm
Something like that, is so accustomed to like bias searching, right? It's like if it's like I mean anything that you type online, right? Like you could type in like does coffee give you cancer? Most studies would say no. Or you could type in like, does your chance of cancer increase if you drink coffee? Then you may get studies that say like it might. But on what scale are we talking about? Or something as far as like the cold plunging. It's like for people that, for LeBron James, right, who needs to reduce inflammation because he's playing like 8 games in a row on the road. Is he going to benefit from cold plunging? Probably so, because like he's an elite athlete who needs the specific reasons, the anti-inflammatory response of, you know, a cold environment to help him in his game. Is any gym goer at a commercial gym or Equinox or 24 hour gonna benefit from cold plunging and just doing it to do it? Maybe not. I did cold plunging actually as a part of my prep because I kind of bought into the hype. Like I ran into these guys and they were like selling a ice pass that, I could do. And I was like, oh great, that's not too expensive. I'm gonna really like test myself mentally and just do it and see, just give it a shot and see if I benefit from it at all. And I did it and it felt cool. And I had cool videos to put on social media. And then I was like, I kind of took a step back and I'm like, wait a second, this is like cold as shit. I don't feel like I'm recovering any better than I was while not doing the cold plunging. There are some studies that show that it can be a little damaging for hypertrophy, especially like if you're trying to increase your muscular size. right? And not just recover for a run or for sports. And I was trying to increase my muscular size. So I was like, wait a second, this might not be the best recovery modality for me. And I just kind of gave that up. And I think that's a good example of like something being really hyped up or people just not understanding what specifically a particular recovery modality or trend or fad does, and then just doing it to do it and
Mhm.
like not really seeing any measurable or attainable benefits. I think like that's where all of the information and all the stuff we see on social can be like a little not dangerous because like nobody's damaging themselves cold plunging, but like maybe a little time consuming and, monetarily speaking, like not beneficial. Your time could be better spent elsewhere, I think.
One that you posted a lot on your story, or that I've seen over, the couple years of knowing you, that you
Yeah.
like to harp on, is I love how you bring back, because there are all these fads, a lot with diet. I love how you just shed attention though on it's very, very simple as calorie deficit and calorie surplus,
Yeah.
um,
It's so
calories in,
simple.
calories out. Hmm.
It's so, so simple. Like when you really get down to it, I think the other day, right, I posted like, follow this one trick that I use in order to stay lean year round. And it was like that one trick is literally to not consume as many calories as your body needs to maintain itself at its current weight.
Hmm.
And, you know, there are exceptions, right? If you have like hypothyroidism or like, if you're medically struggling with weight loss or weight gain, then there are other things that can be looked into. But for 99.99% of the population, people really, really struggle to grasp the concept that you just don't need as much food as you're eating,
Hmm.
right? You can make drastic, huge changes if you just simply lessen your portions, right? Cut your portions, you know? And I think I do like to poke fun on that on my social media a little bit. Like I'm
Yeah.
posting it as like somewhat of an educational story, but then it's like this guy kind of sounds like an asshole just saying like don't eat that much food. And it's like, well, when you get down to it, that's kind of what needs to be done. Don't eat so much food.
Hmm.
And also expend more energy, right? Get out and walk. Get out and,
Hmm.
go to the gym, go walk, go do something.
Yeah, but that's not what people wanna hear though, right? They want the magic bullet. You want the magic bullet that's gonna be like, "Oh, take this or do this trick, and this is what actually will make you lose all your weight."
100%.
And when they hear it's food, it's like, well, is it real? It's like it is that simple, but it's there now you gotta really do it, and you gotta buy into it, and you gotta track it, and you have to be conscious of it. So so it's work it's work
I
or
think
can be work for, depending on the
what
person, but
I was talking with someone the other day, and they were saying like we were just talking about like dyes because obviously that's kind of like a hot topic right now, like red dye 40,
Yeah.
yellow 30, like all those things, right? And it's like, do those increase, you know, or I guess damage any of our hormone productions? Probably to the smallest negligible marginal level, right? And all these um I was saying, there's like red dye 40 in Cheetos, right? So
Mm.
someone's like, oh, you got to stay away from the red dye. And it's like, well, you don't necessarily have to stay away from the red dye. What you need to stay away from is the Cheetos that have the red dye in them, right?
Yeah.
That the problem is not that you're consuming the red dye or the seed oil or whatever the dye is. It's the fact that you're holding a bag of Cheetos and you're also not expending any energy at the end of the day, right? It's kind of like an epidemic of trying to figure out, um, what specifically we can profit from or market or focus our attention on instead of literally just honing in on the fact that we as a people need to consume less and move more.
Mhm. Mhm.
percent. I that's very well said. Is you're finding all the different things, but when it comes down to it, it's really so simple. And if you can just do that one thing of reducing your food to like what your body actually needs, you'll see way more gains and health gains all like across all different parts of your life.
100%.
100%.
People get really caught up and I know there's so many different perspectives and sides to it, but people get really caught up in like seed oils nowadays, right? Because of like, the inflammatory response that like, rapeseed and canola oil. And it's like, well, why are you gravitating towards foods that contain these heavy oils in the first place? Right? The
Hmm.
oils, sure, in excess can be moderately problematic, but also if you're eating these hyperpalatable foods that are fried in these oils or contain these oils, you're also getting exorbitant amounts of fat and just calories, like empty, unnecessary calories from these foods as well. And like that's the problem,
I
you
love
know?
that. Yeah. Zoom out. Yeah, that's a great call out too. It's just like we're focusing on such a nitty gritty detail where it's like, okay, what's the actual root problem here? Um,
Yeah, right. Zoom out. People want to kind of throw the blame around, I'm not losing weight, it must be the seed oils. I'm not losing weight, it must be the red dye. I'm not losing weight, it must be whatever. It's like, well, you're not losing weight because you don't exercise, because you
yeah,
don't
yeah,
sweat, because you consume
Yeah.
too many calories. That's
hmm
probably why we're not losing weight. There are exceptions, of course, with many, many people, but most likely it's because we're consuming too many calories.
Cool. Well, I think we've kind of covered a lot of bases here. I know kind of time's running up on us. Just want to wrap things up. Is there anything new? Any new projects that you're taking on here coming up? Sounds like you might be doing another show end of the year.
Yeah, so the goal is to it's so funny. It's a constant battle, especially like once you've entered this space, I'll try and put on some size and I'll be in this caloric surplus. And then I'm like, oh no, the abs are getting kind of muddy. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, I'm gonna cut my calories a little bit and maybe drop back down so I can see some abs again.
Yeah.
And, like I had mentioned, you got to put on that size if you want to chip away and then reveal what's underneath. So sometimes that comes with the sacrifice of losing the abs. So I guess we'll see if I try and put on some size here shortly and sacrifice the abs. I know summer's coming up, so it may not be the best idea. But um but yeah, I mean I definitely do want to find a show maybe, towards the end of this year or the beginning of next year and really start pushing it, upping that intensity in the gym, really being in that slight caloric surplus just so my muscles have a little bit more fuel. I can recover a little bit better. Um, I am jumping into, so I'm a coach at Equinox, one of the top coaches at Marina Del Rey, and I just actually got accepted into the manager and training program up there as well. So I'm kind of going to be
Congrats.
shifting. Thank you. I'm going to be shifting gears a little bit and focusing on a little bit of that more like managerial route, or at least learning what that takes until I get certified, and I get the certifications so I can kind of pursue that manager role.
Hmm.
So that's going to be, kind of taking up a lot of my time. That as well as just a full client load as well. And then, I got a girlfriend, I got two dogs. We're always just trying to make life happen, just finding that balance.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and of course finding time for me to train as well. I always so funny like once you get that bug. Um, it's like we're just substituting one addiction for another. Like whatever I used to do in my life, now it's all about training. And like the only thing I can focus on is training. When am I going to get to the
Yeah.
gym? When am I going to eat? When am I going to get that pump in? And I guess that's better than the alternative. It keeps me out of trouble. So I guess I'm kind of blessed in a sense that I'm so addicted to fitness that I don't focus on other things sometimes, right?
Hmm. Any socials? Where can people find you? You're at
Yeah,
Equinox Marina
definitely.
Del Rey.
For sure. You can give me a follow. I'm pretty active on Instagram. It's burgers and bodybuilding, because those are my two main focuses usually. I'm all about food, so burgers, and then that's accompanied by bodybuilding. So my handle's burgers and bodybuilding. I like to post a bunch of random stuff on there. Sometimes it's memes, sometimes it's fitness related content. But yeah, give me a follow for sure. And, I do some online stuff as well. So if anybody listening has any questions regarding tips, tricks, advice, guidance, macro manipulation, coaching, anything, you can always shoot me a follow, reach out to me on there. Um, but yeah, man, that's about it.
Awesome.
Well, thanks for
Well,
thanks for taking the time. This is awesome.
yeah, no, this is great. Really appreciate it, man.
This was really cool. Yeah, Tyler, Brandon, I really appreciate the opportunity to to get on here and tell you a little bit about myself. Maybe we'll do another in the future. We can dive into some more stuff. But I sincerely appreciate it, and I look forward to talking with you guys later.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, anyone that's wanting to get into training, I can attest Austin's one of the best. Give him a follow and reach out to him. Thanks again.